Episode 171 of 5 Drinks Through Midnight. In the show, we bring the questions, guests bring the drinks, we try to wrap up before midnight. Today, we are headed back to the Spaniard to talk to Jay Erisman, co-founder of new Riff Distilling. But before we get started, like, subscribe, hit the bells, the whistles, leave a comment if you like what we're doing. Let's get started. For joining me. 5 drinks through midnight, 5 drinks, 5 questions, midnight, whatever comes first. Thank you so much for joining me at the Spaniard. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Nice to be back in the city and in Jersey too.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back.
Thanks, Tim.
What are we drinking first?
Well, so we got 5 drinks, right, that we talk about, and I selected 5 things that maybe help tell the story of New Riff, as well as my personal narrative and how the hell we came to be doing this.
Okay.
That are good fodder and good drinks, I assure you. And let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to try is maybe a nice starter. You know, when I do tastings and things, we do a lineup. I usually put our gin at the end. Okay. Because it can affect people's palate for tasting the whiskey. We have the gin at the end. But we're going to have it here first in the guise of a martini.
Excellent.
Which is all fine because we're professionals.
Yeah.
We're professionals.
And water, yes.
So we're good. Excellent. So starting with our gin. So this is an example of New Riff's Kentucky Wild Gin. Okay. This is a gin that we made from the very early days at New Riff. So we opened in 2014. Started distilling June of that year, and I began the process that summer of figuring out how to make a gin.
All right.
Let me tell you about this and then tell you why I made it and the backstory a little bit of me and gin. Okay. So it's called Kentucky Wild Gin because it is what some people call a terroir-driven gin. Okay. A gin that is made with, somewhere on the face of the earth, with botanicals from that part of the earth. I think anywhere you live, possibly excepting Antarctica, I guess you'd have to make penguin gin, and that doesn't sound very good. Yeah. But outside of that, anywhere you live, I believe there are ingredients, botanicals that can wend their way into a gin. And I wanted to do that for Kentucky. I wanted our great whiskey region of Kentucky to not only have some more gin that was distilled there, but distilled out of there, to come out of where we live, of our homeland, where we come from, and distilled with the flavors of our woods and our fields. Well, what do we have in Kentucky? We don't have fields of citrus, like it's lemon and whatever. In Florida, they would make, grapefruit gin. Well, we don't have that in Kentucky. What else? We don't have fields of orris flowers. We don't have some of these things. You know what we have, though, is juniper. Okay. And a hell of a lot of it. All right. When you come to Kentucky and you're driving down the road on the highway, you will pass on the highway, up and down the road, there are pine trees. Those are all juniper trees. Okay. They're a juniper species. It's called the Eastern Red Cedar. And it's called, the scientific name is Juniperus virginiana. Everybody, you go look that up. Juniperus virginiana. It's a juniper tree. It has actually been used before in gin making in Kentucky, cited as far back as 1819. Oh, wow. So when I went looking for local botanicals, I just found the same things they found almost 200 years ago. So we have a forager in the woods. He's a wonderful hippie farmer. He has got a passion for picking juniper like nothing you ever saw. Right. He picks the hell out of these things and delivers us 20, 30, 40, 60 pounds a year sometimes of juniper. It's actually my most expensive botanical that goes in the gin. There are a total of 10 botanicals, by the way, including regular bog standard juniper. But the local juniper augments that traditional juniper to the tune of about 4.5 pounds of juniper, of our local juniper, go in each batch of gin. It's not a tablespoon. Okay. So we actually have in a plethora of the most important ingredient in gin, which is juniper. So local juniper goes into this. And then the other ingredient I put into this, it's called the American spice bush. Okay. And this is it's a bush. It grows natively all over the woods of Kentucky and the Ohio Valley. It puts off this little red, sort of football-shaped berry which has a flavor some people describe as like allspice.
Okay.
Kind of like allspice. The way I put it is, if it's like allspice, but it's playing bluegrass banjo, and it's got a twang, and that's the American Spice Bush. This is an ancient seasoning where we come from.
Okay.
And who knew it would make a double gold medal award-winning gin at the
yeah.
San Francisco World Spirits Competition.
Awesome.
So, on top of all that, the gin is unchill filtered,
Okay.
just like the whiskey. And it is also made with a base that includes about 10% of our unaged rye new make. So the white dog, if you will.
Yeah.
And that provides a little bit of flavor, but it mostly provides a textural contribution. So this winds up being quite a mouthful of gin.
All right.
So why we're having a martini goes to my history with gin and my background. I'm a gin guy, I'm a martini man. I was raised by a martini man.
Okay.
My father, 92 years old, is a retired chemist. And he grew up, I watched him in the kitchen, and because he's a chemist, he's a martini man, he would make his martinis, take the gin and pour it out in a graduated cylinder.
Okay.
Right? Down to the damn milliliter, my old man is making his preferred ratio of martini. He even had a plastic graduated cylinder, and this was the travel model. And we would go driving across the country in the 1970s, and we'd get to the Holiday Inn, and he'd say, "Kids, go find the ice machine." And out of his bag, he pulled a handle of gin and a travel plastic graduated cylinder, and there in the motel room, he would make the same damn martini he had the night before.
Awesome.
So I was raised with this image. It was never a shot and a beer with my dad.
Right.
It was like the Violent Hour.
Yeah.
It was a curated, crafted cocktail moment.
That's
My dad was the first mixologist I ever knew. That's what I was raised with. So that was the inception of, this is a fascinating thing.
All right.
And boom, 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 in the fullness of time, we made a bourbon distillery, and now we're 10 years old or 11 years old, and we're in 50 states.
There we go.
The inception of it for me was my old man in the kitchen crafting cocktails and martinis. So
awesome.
With that in mind, let's enjoy
Cheers.
a Kentucky Wild Gin
Awesome.
martini. Here's to you,
Cheers.
Dad. Thanks. Big gin.
Oh, that's really nice.
Thank you.
That is. I've been told, not question one, but I've been told this is kind of like your baby out of everything.
Right. So the gin. I'm the co-founder of New Riff. I was the whiskey man is often how I describe myself. I was the creative half of the two guys that started it. Ken Lewis, my boss since 2001 at the Party Source, the founder and owner, and of course it wouldn't have happened without him saying let's sell the store and build the distillery. But I supplied the sort of creative side, the whiskey side, the liquid side of that partnership, if you will. And I had a lot to do with making all the whiskeys, but they're not solely my effort. You know, we have a lot of people with input to that. Certainly, Brian Sprance, our master distiller today, had a lot of input. Our consultant in the early days, Larry Ebersole, helped us a lot. But the gin was my recipe.
Okay.
This was something I figured out how to make in the summer of 2014 when we came and built New Riff. All of us put together had distilled this much. Distilled in our lives. We'd never distilled a thing. I had a whiskey collection in my freshman dorm room, but I did not have a still.
Right.
I kind of wish I did, but I never did that. I never did any illicit distillation. I was a home brewer,
Right.
and so I learned the basics of brewing and converting starches into sugars and those kind of things. And Brian, for his part, came to us from the craft beer industry. Brian was a ridiculously good brewer in Cincinnati. He's the best brewer in the town, and now he's a master distiller too. He came to us from Boston Beer, and he had a background in beverage production, and so that was a huge help to us. But all put together, we had never distilled a thing, and yet that January of 2019, we go to San Francisco World Spirits Competition with our whole portfolio, both of the gins, this gin and our bourbon barreled variant, which is barrel aged. Those two, and our bottled and bond bourbon and our bottled and bond rye and our single barrel bourbon. And we ran the table with double gold medals at that first ever San Francisco World Spirits Competition, the highest stage in the world and we swept.
That's
and so then
awesome.
we knew we did it right. We're not going to screw it up.
That's awesome. Well, I guess we kind of have touched base now on a little bit of the origin story in little bits and pieces, but I guess question one, how'd you get started in the spirits business?
Right. So, as I alluded to, I had a whiskey collection in my 18-year-old dorm room, and going off to college, sort of continued the germ of interest in fine drink, beer, wine, everything. I am omnibibulous. I drink everything.
Okay.
Not a lot of vodka, but I drink everything and enjoy it all. And so I set about learning, not just drinking things for the heck of that, but there was a certain connoisseurship. I read books. I learned. I taught myself about all these things. And by the time I joined the Party Source in 2001, I had a decent collection at home of spirits from all around the world. And without really realizing what I was doing, I was training my palate and sharpening my skills to someday do what I did at the Party Source, which was become a fine spirits buyer and manager. And that morphed and exploded into the program that we had at the Party Source, which had not happened really probably in the state before in the way that we went about doing it. Private barrels and projects. Pretty intimate projects with the bourbon distillers. We had, being the largest store in the state, Ken Lewis, a legend retailer in the state, we had a lot of access to the distilleries. They all knew who Ken Lewis was, and so I had the opportunity to really go into the warehouses, go into their labs, and do projects with them. And so it was the Party Source from 2001 that was the inception of formally working in the industry.
That's awesome.
And then obviously the new Riff birthed out of that. And it probably wouldn't have happened had the two people not met and been working together. I go to work for Ken Lewis, visionary, entrepreneur, genius level in the retail liquor. No other liquor store owner in the country could have conceived of such a thing. But I don't know that he would have done it had it not been for my work there. And they weren't looking to hire someone to do this stuff. I just came along, and it was the proverbial right people at the right time, and here we are.
That's awesome. I think that's a fucking awesome origin story. And two, I think that I love the ode to dad. I think that's fucking awesome. And that idea of a whiskey company, kind of your main baby being a gin, which is
the first thing that we distilled and released was the two gins. It was a way to obviously in the early days it was a way to have a small revenue stream, get bars, things like that, serve it at our own bar without having to wait for it to age. We could have made vodka or whatever. For me, whatever we do at New Riff, it's got to have some soul. It's got to have a reason. There has to be a philosophy behind it. It's never about, well, we need something in the vodka category. No. It has to be compelling. And you can make a compelling gin, like I said, anywhere in the world. And this is. It's distilled out of Kentucky. It is a native expression of where we come from. You could do that with vodka if you, let's say you own a potato farm. It's been your family since 1825. Now that's a great vodka story.
Sure.
But just distilling vodka,
yeah.
And we didn't have a vodka still, and we weren't going to invest in that kind of equipment. So there was never a question of doing something like that. But gin was a way to push all those buttons, including personally the ones.
That's fucking awesome. Well, there we go. Question one. Cheers.
Cheers, my man.
Question two. Drink two. What are we drinking?
We're drinking, Tim, New Riff, bottled in bond, Kentucky straight rye whiskey. Yeah. It is, as you see here, it's embossed. Here the embossing. This is, by the way, this embossment, just about my favorite part of our package. Anytime I pour a bottle of it, I hold it by the embossing. You have a haptic. A haptic,
That's awesome.
touch thing. But it says bottled in bond, without chill filtration.
Right.
And we'll break all this down in a little bit, but the quick and short answer is everything New Riff makes is bottled in bond.
Okay.
That's a slight exaggeration because the single barrel products of which we sell a god-awful amount of them. In some markets, our biggest selling product is the single barrel bourbon. Is of course barrel strength, and so it can't be bottled in bond, which has to be 100 proof. Everything we do is bottled in bond. We don't have small batch 80 proof. We don't have 2-year-old 90 proof or anything like that. Everything that New Riff does is bottled in bond. And so when we come out with a new whiskey, like number 3 that we're about to taste in a few minutes, that is bottled in bond. When malted rye hit the market, that was bottled in bond. The winter whiskey, I think you've had, which is chocolate oatmeal stout mashbill, bottled in bond. It's just the only way we roll.
That's awesome.
With just a few exceptions, and one of them is the barrel proof things we make, like whiskey number 5. I'm trying to roll out. That's going to be cask strength and so on. So there are things we do that aren't bottled in bond. But the point being, we are a bottled in bond distillery, and unlike the other distilleries in Kentucky, all of whom have a bottled in bond, or they have a line extension that is bottled in bond, and they say we need a bonded product. We approach this category differently. We only do bottled in bond because, as we allude to on the back label, bottled in bond since 1897, the Bottled in Bond Act, is the world's highest standard for quality in a brown spirit. It's higher than the standards in, God bless them, Scotland, and I love some Scotch, like we're about to talk about. Much higher than the standards in cognac. You know, great spirits region. Do you know all the shit you can add to cognac? You can put a lot of stuff in cognac, flavoring and oak flavoring and sugar and stuff like that. It's way higher than the standards in, God bless you, Canada. You know, I feel for you right now, Canada, but your whiskey, you can put a lot of stuff in Canadian whiskey. Well, anyway, bottled in bond is the world's highest standard. It's the only standard that insists on high proof, 100 proof. And so as we explored the question coming to market with New Riff, and we asked the question internally, should we make a bottled in bond? We realized, no, we should only make bottled in bond. And so that is the flagship New Riff whiskeys. When people ask, what's your favorite? And for me personally, they're all like my kids. You know, it's hard to have a favorite, but internally, me and Brian Sprance and our CEO Hannah Lowen and the people who've been here from day 0 or day 1, we have a lot of personal affinity for bottled in bond because we knew what it took to commit to this, to get to this, and a lot of people never get to it, or 15 years in, they finally do a bottled in bond. I call some of those friends up and say, congratulations on a bottled in bond. But we did that from the beginning. That's the only way we roll. So we came to it from a perspective of, if that's the world's highest standard for quality, and it's one of Kentucky's most hallowed traditions, the time when Kentucky Bourbon distillers stood up and said, no, damn it, we make the good whiskey, not those rectifiers there in my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm afraid, was ground zero of the rectifying industry, and they made all these rock gut whiskeys, but the Kentucky Bourbon distiller said, no, we make the good stuff, we want a protection around it, and that was the bottled in bond, like one of Kentucky's most hallowed of these old traditions, and we do a New Riff on that when, Tim, we don't chill filter it, because in the language, the legal writ of bottled in bond, the one thing that the federal government allows you to do that changes the whiskey from the barrel is they allow you to do a filtration upon it, such as the language they use is chill proofing, but what they mean is chill filtration, and we don't do that. So we believe we are taking already the world's highest standard to a new paradigm, and that new paradigm is bottled in bond without chill filtration. And it is the nth degree, if you will, that even most bottled in bond doesn't do. So no chill filtration upon this. So with that said, we're going to talk about the mash bill in a second, but let's stop talking and have a sip. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
Bottled in bond, New Riff rye.
This is just so fucking good.
So the mash bill, conveniently printed on the back of the label, is 95% rye, 5% malted rye. 5% malted rye. Like all new Riff products, every drop distilled by us in our distillery in Newport, Kentucky. So 95% rye, 5% malted rye. That malted rye serves as a leavening agent, a mellowing effect, because when you malt the rye grain, it becomes so soft and gentle. If we did 6 spirits today, I would include our malted rye, but we're not doing that. Right. Hie thee to a liquor store and a bar and get yourself some New Riff malted rye, everybody. It is so gentle and mellow and soft. It's a revelation in the rye category. But that 5% malted rye is a little bit of a sort of rounding off of the edges, if you will, that some people find in rye. But the other point to this rye and how supple it is that no chill filtration. We retain, by not filtering the whiskey, we retain all the good things about it, all the aroma and the flavor, all of the color. I think the most important part of no chill filtration for an American whiskey, and especially for a rye, is we retain all the texture. The texture is retained. And so our rye has an additional degree of mouthfeel, of oily, creamy richness. The fatty acids, they are all retained, or fatty. What does that sound like? Steaks, butter, cream, fat, richness. And so when you taste this, it's mouth coating.
It is.
In a way that not all ryes are. But I'm going to show you what this looks like here. And we're going to see this smoothness like this. And when we add a little bit of water to this whiskey, look at the oils that swim around in here. Do you see these oils coming out of suspension, swimming around in there? Tim, that is smoothness you can see. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
There you go.
Smoothness you can see. That is whiskey purity. It's really all the character from the barrel translated into your liver. I mean, in your glass. The glass, Tim, the glass. So, hit it with a little water if you like, and see if as with me, you find that the flavor, the aroma opens up. There are additional things that come out, flavors that come out. Now, those of you watching at home, you can drink your whiskey. I've been saying for 25 years, drink it any way you want, just buy it from me. Buy New Riff, drink it anyway. You can pour it out on the ground after you buy it. I'm kidding.
As long as they bought it from you.
Yeah. But adding a little water, to me, that is the way to enjoy, to best enjoy, to get the most possible experience out of a bottle of New Riff is I say no ice, but a little bit of water, and it softens it, and even more so, it brings a little bit of all those flavors out, releases additional aromas.
All right, so question 2.
Right.
From our social stalking and research that we did, I've been told that you are a huge music fan.
I am, yeah.
And that In Living Color is your favorite band.
Living Color is one of my very big influences. Yes, I'm a guitar player.
Okay.
I play Jimi Hendrix. I write riffs. I play Living Color. Post 1960s, the guitar players of the 60s. Pete Townsend was first for me, but Hendrix was a huge influence. The late great Jeff Beck. Oh, I miss him. Was a big influence. But post those guys, Living Color and Vernon Reid was who lives here in New York, Staten Island. Was a huge influencer.
Okay.
Yes, Living
Color.
Color.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry. That's the TV show. Yeah. Sorry.
I've been dealing with it for years. Sorry, Living Color, Vernon.
Yeah, sorry. Slip, Freudian slip. So I've been told that New Riff has kind of almost a punk ethos to it, as what you guys have gone through. But then again, hearing you talk about the bottle and bond and making sure everything is following that kind of tradition and law, what is one level of kind of rebellion that you think makes New Riff New Riff?
Great question, Tim. I love that question and where it's going, but I'm going to depart a little bit from the premise of that question, if I may.
Please.
I need a sip of rye to fortify me for this journey, Timothy.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So, So let's begin with the name of New Riff, without trying to go for half an hour down a whole huge tunnel of information. And I wish I could say I came up with the name, guitarist and everything, but it wasn't me. It was Ken Lewis, who, it's hard to name a distillery. You can't just call it Old Lewis or Old Newport. It's got to be, ever since Maker's Mark in the 1950s, you've got to have a metaphorical name. You've got to have a name with more swing than just old something. Cream of Newport is not going to cut it anymore. Goodness knows. So what do you name this thing? We were struggling to name New Riff, and the first idea was shot down in a trademark situation, and so we're like, what are we going to name this? And Ken Lewis comes in one day to the naming meeting. Me and Ken and Hannah Lowen, our CEO, now CEO, we're in this meeting. What are we going to name this? And Ken says, I had an idea. What if we consider the distiller like a musician? And he's there every day. He knows the tradition. He knows how to do it, but he does it different. He plays the tune differently. He makes it different. He puts a new riff on the whiskey, and it stuck.
Nice.
Now Ken is an old deadhead. Grateful Dead. All day long for Ken Lewis. I think probably around the time I was born, Ken was following the Dead literally in the proverbial bus.
All right.
Smoke pouring out of it. Not the engine.
Yeah.
Ken is an old Deadhead, and so the Grateful Dead, this great, maybe America's greatest band, this improvisational legacy of they never do it the same way twice, and that filtered its way through Ken into the name. And so New Riff, that's where it comes from. So we are playing a new riff, a jazz riff, a guitar riff, right? Different every time. That's the origin of the name. And of course, I'm sitting there in this meeting like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. This is fucking fantastic. We might be named New Riff, And the name stuck, and it all worked, and that's the name. I even like the rhythm. Riff. Riff.
It's got a good.
It sounds good. It's got a good punch, to it. But with all respect to the punk movement and everything, I never conceived of us as a punk rock distillery.
Gotcha.
That wasn't the ethos. To me, it really was much more of that, out of that 60s vintage explosion of rock and roll and pop music and so on. I found far more affinity, no doubt because of my own music preferences and influences, but because I'm not a punk guitar player, that's not where I live. It came much more out of the ethos and process of the 60s rock revolutionaries. But I never viewed us as kicking out the old.
Okay.
I saw New Riff as embracing the old, and that's what it says on the back of the bottle.
Yeah.
A new riff on an old tradition. It doesn't say, get rid of the old tradition.
Right.
It doesn't say, get the fuck out of here with your sour mash. We are embracing that. We learned it. And we make actually kind of classically inspired stuff. How do we make it? It's in a column beer still, just like the big places. It's in a doubler, just like the big places. We sour mash, just like all the granddaddies did back in the day. We're not reinventing things, but along the way, we allow ourselves room, cognitively, theoretically, philosophically, in terms of grain, the barrels, everything, to do a new riff on that old tradition.
Gotcha.
And so we're not really a punk rock thing. What I could maybe look at that's maybe a little revolutionary or reactionary is that spirit of being willing to throw that out.
Gotcha.
To sometimes go really far afield. We don't have it here today, but one of our most provocative whiskeys probably that we made was Backsetter. I think we've tasted it maybe before in our prior meetings.
Yeah, travel
bar in Brooklyn and everything. When we made a peated whiskey, part of which we'll taste in a few minutes when we taste our I shouldn't say yet, right?
Whiskey.
We're going to get to that when we taste a malt whiskey, but we made a peated whiskey, and because in making sour mash whiskey, you are always taking yesterday's or the prior distillation and using the grains from that to influence the flavor of the next batch. And when we made peated malt whiskey, that flavor came into the next batch of rye and the next batch of bourbon. And so Backsetter was a little bit punk in its ethos. It was taking the old tradition but absolutely upending it with flavor. And yet it was also purely in the tradition. There was nothing we put into the Backsetter whiskey. You can look it up on our website. We can provide a link, the story of Backsetter and everything. There was nothing in that was not just plain old sour mash bourbon.
Right.
We didn't put peated grain in it. We put peated Backsetter in it. And we didn't even do it planning that it would be some revolutionary bottle. We just did it because that's what you do every day in a distillery like that.
I guess I went punk because you talk a lot about independence and being your own. So
that is critical.
Yeah.
We couldn't do what we do if we were a corporately owned distillery. And New Riff is independent. We are owned by Ken Lewis and his family. There are no shareholders, partners, investment bankers, venture capital, bean counters. Nobody telling us, "Are you kidding me? Can't you make this $75? And by the way, make it 2 years old." And quit with this bottom to bottom bullshit. Nobody getting in the way of us and our creative people and exploring new riffs on an old tradition. So we couldn't do it without that independence.
Well, there we go. Question 2 done. Jeez.
Thanks, Tim.
Question 3, drink 3. What are we drinking?
Right on. Number 3, Tim. Folks ask me all the time, I taste them through the portfolio of new riffs, what's your favorite? And they're all like my kids. It's hard to have a favorite. But sentimentally, this whiskey really means a lot to me. This is Balboa Rye. Balboa. Nothing to do with the movie, but it is an Italian name, sort of. So Balboa Rye. This is an heirloom rye whiskey. I'm a foodie, also, Tim. I was never a professional chef, although I did cook in some kitchens and have some work in those kind of contexts over my life. But I'm probably an amateur chef at my home. I make prosciutto.
Okay.
I live at a pretty high level when it comes to these kind of things.
Nice.
So I'm interested in gastronomy and in flavors and things like that, and agriculture, biodiversity. I'm a member of Slow Food. Maybe you've heard of the Slow Food movement. The gastronomical and food justice organization that now has chapters all over the world. It started in Italy. And I was a member of, a chapter leader actually of Slow Food Cincinnati. And so I was always interested in biodiversity and preserving old flavors and heirloom agricultural products. We've heard of heirlooms. A lot of people know heirloom tomatoes. In fact, there are heirloom products of every agricultural category. There are heirloom tomatoes, heirloom potatoes, heirloom potatoes, right? Heirloom apples, heirloom breeds of chicken. There are heirloom grains. And in this case, we have heirloom rye.
All right.
So Balboa is what we call this. It actually, to slightly without going way down a hole, it's actually not called Balboa. The name of the grain is actually Balbo.
Okay.
B-A-L-B-O, which is the name of an Italian aviator in the 1930s who provided a little inspiration for the scientists in America, the agronomists, who created this strain in the 1930s. And they said, what are we going to name it? Well, they named it after this Italian aviator. He's like the Charles Lindbergh of Italy. Okay. And Balboa was his name. Well, over the years, it became, I don't know how, Balboa. This is how it was sold to us, and so we call it Balboa. Okay. Right, but Balboa. So Balboa rye. And this is an heirloom rye. Now, I always wanted New Riff to be able to work, given my background in slow food and things like that. I held out a hope that we could work with heirloom grains. But it's difficult for a distillery to work with heirloom grains. For a baker, it's not all that hard at all. You get a 50-pound bag of flour, you can make a goodly amount of bread with that. We need 8,000 pounds of grain in order to make just one batch of this rye. So how do we go about getting 8,000 pounds? And often when you are working with heirloom grains as a distiller, sometimes you have to start with a little packet of seeds, like the little tablespoon of packet of seeds, like you buy in the store to grow your tomatoes. So you start with that, you plant that, and it makes a crop as big as this table. And you take those seeds and you plant it again, and it's a crop the size of a swimming pool. And then it's the size of a football field. And year 4 or 5 or 6 down the road, you finally have enough grain to make batches of 8,000 pounds worth of grain. So it takes years to grow out an heirloom crop. So it's not for the faint of heart.
Sure.
If you are a distiller.
Fucking time.
It does, yeah. It takes multiple harvests and years growing it. So that was the challenge in that. So 2014, we begin distilling, and we have employed the services of who we firmly believe to be the best corn farmer in the bourbon industry. His name, it's a great name for a farmer. His name is Charles Fogg.
Oh, that is a good name.
With 2 G's.
All right.
The man is a meteorological event, right? Charles Fogg, and he grows corn for whiskey making.
Okay.
He is trained by bourbon industry chemists and scientists to grow corn for whiskey making, not tortilla chips, not cornmeal, not grits, not ethanol, bourbon, right, to make this. So we enlist the services of Charles Fogg, and he's a wonderful, wonderful farmer. Because he's a wonderful, wonderful farmer, he grows a cover crop in his fields, and over the winter, he plants a crop that will protect the fields, protect the soil from erosion, restore nitrogen into the soil. In the spring, he typically would just plow it under, and the nutrition goes back in the soil. This is the kind of thing you do when you're a really wonderful farmer. Well, he was using rye for this, and that's mostly all he ever did with it. He didn't sell it to anybody. He just had this rye, and because he never had a financial incentive to go and get a more modern variety of the rye grain, he was rolling all these, 20, 25, 30 years with this vintage heirloom grain that was what you used in Indiana. That's where he's located, about an hour and a half from us in Indiana. He was just rolling in his fields with this heirloom grain. And so he was delivering grain to us in the summer, I think it was August of 2014, and he and I were watching. He personally delivered the truck full of grain, and we're watching the grain come out of the truck, and he turns to me and says, "By the way, Jay, did I ever tell you I make rye too?" "What? You make rye?" I was so surprised. "Tim, I fell down on the ground." No, I didn't fall down on the ground, but I was stunned that he grew rye also, and he was growing this rye. So, the phrase, you could say we got lucky,
right,
working with Charles Fogg, but really we made our own luck. And we worked with this great corn farmer. Of course, he was growing an heirloom rye in his fields all the time, and he could say to us, "How much do you want? 8,000 pounds? How about 50,000 pounds?" And he started delivering us Balboa rye.
Wow.
And overnight, we could get into the business of making an heirloom grain whiskey, as opposed to having grow out year after year after season after season to get to a point where we could make some whiskey.
Awesome.
So it got us into the heirloom grain game right away. And what I always wanted us to do, and yet here it is out of the gate. So the mash bill on the Balboa rye, again, it is printed on the back of the bottle. If you recall from whiskey number 2, our mash bill on our regular rye is 95% rye, 5% malted rye. The mash bill on Balboa is 95% Balboa, 5% malted rye. We replace 1 for 1 the regular rye with the Balboa, the heirloom grain. So these 2 whiskeys, I like to show them juxtaposed because they are exhibit A to answer the question, can I tell the difference? Can I tell the difference with this heirloom grain? Is it all that important? Does it make a difference? Let's taste it and see it. So here is our 95% rye. Okay. The regular, what we just tried, your rib. And take a whiff of that, and then check out the Balboa. And there is manifestly a difference. It is so obvious. We didn't do a trick like it's 10% Balboa and we just put the name on the label. It's all Balboa. That's how we did it. And it is so markedly different. It's like the difference between the grocery store tomato and the fresh heirloom tomato. grown in the local fields. With the caveat being that our regular rye is friggin' fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't describe Balboa as better than our regular rye, but it's absolutely different. And it highlights and proves the point of, are heirlooms worth the trouble? Are they, should anybody be bothering with these? Try it with some water. And, it's so special. I hope that distillers around the country can continue the work of finding the heirloom from where they do business in the sort of upper Midwest, Ohio Valley area. Balboa, by the 1940s, had become a dominant rye strain, and that persisted up into probably the early 70s. Mid-1970s, Balboa began to be replaced by newer varietals, which were improved, and they have improved disease resistance, or they don't blow down in the wind and things like that. They're higher yielding, whatever they are, quote unquote, better. This is agriculture, and human beings have been doing this for about 12,000 years.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. The pity, though, is when you lose the flavor of the old varietal.
Sure.
Or the real pity is when you alter the grain and you lose that flavor. Like modern wheat, or some modern corn doesn't have the flavor of the old varietals. Modern rye varietals typically are still delicious, and they give good flavor. But this is a distinctive flavor. This has not been made into whiskey almost in living memory, Balboa rye. And here we have an example of it in a 95% pure format.
Are you guys the only one that uses that grain?
As far as I know.
Okay.
I think if you go and search on the interweb Balboa rye, probably the first thing that pops up is Mighty New Riff.
Yeah.
But again, to get it in the first place is not easy. You can't just call this up and order it from a grain company. You have to have these grown. And to that end, for New Riff's point, we have gone and done work not only with Balboa rye and done work with heirloom rye. We have mashed and distilled heirloom rye, heirloom corns, several of them.
Yeah.
Heirloom wheat. We distilled red turkey wheat, which is an 1850s vintage varietal that is still used by artisan bakers. I don't know who the best baker is in this zip code. I bet they are using some heirloom wheat in their breads. So we did wheat. We even have done heirloom barley in part of our single malt program. It includes an heirloom barley whiskey that we have made. So we have made heirloom whiskeys, heirloom grains into our whiskeys in sort of all the categories or all the flavors. But the signature of those and the standard bearer is Balboa. And so that's whiskey number 3.
Cheers. Oh, it's fucking glorious.
It's really cool. It's still, to my taste, there's spice.
Yeah.
But the spice is sort of shifted over a little bit to make room for other flavors. There's more floral. There's more fruit. It has a rounder texture, not quite as crisp, cutting as our regular rye, which can be so sort of powerful through a cocktail. But the Balboa is rounder.
Yeah.
It's just glorious.
This is so nice. Like again, like you said, nothing wrong with the regular rye.
It's delicious. Yeah.
But like this, and then even just that little bit of water that I added, it's just that's so fucking good. Alright, so question 3.
Right on.
Is we call this our talking shit segment because we've had 3 drinks, and so we're a little bit more open and honest with ourselves. Not really. Much shit. But so question 3: what's one myth that you wish would die in the whiskey world?
Oh, good question. Right, that's a great question. I could talk some shit about that probably. Which one should it be? There's so many.
Well, I mean, like so many people, bourbon can only be made in Kentucky, and all that. And like again, you guys talk a lot about independence and doing things your way. And I think that there's just
good question. Gosh, let's isolate that question down a little bit to Kentucky, and maybe not the whiskey world writ large. Kentucky. If you come to New Riff and take a tour, and all of our tour guides do this, but my favorite place to begin the tour is out in the parking lot.
Okay.
Because out there in the parking lot is the most boring thing on the whole Bourbon Trail, Tim. It's a manhole.
Okay.
And I love to start my tours out there. I bring people out there and we gather around the mantle and I say, tourists, ladies and gentlemen, you have come all this way to see a friggin' mantle. But that's the genesis of this flavor, of New Riff's production story, if you will. That's our well. It's the top of our well. We drilled a 100-foot deep well right in front of the distillery, topped by this manhole that goes down into an aquifer. And that aquifer is full of limestone-rich water. The water comes into this aquifer, some of it from the Ohio River, but most of it from the hills that are behind and to the south of New Riff. And these hills are full of limestone. Okay. And the water in these hills goes down the hill into our aquifer and gives us this pristine, fantastic distilling water. Awesome. So that water, when you taste the water alone, the water is like big, fat-ass water. You're like, damn, this is some watery water. Where did this stuff come from? You know, it's not ordinary water. It's so full of mineral flavor. It has about 4 times as much minerality as a typical tap water in the area, in the region. And in fact, those tap waters are what most of the state of Kentucky runs the whiskey on. Okay. You can't run a huge bourbon factory distillery on the image that they promote of the limestone water. Yes, there is limestone water in Kentucky. We have some. There is a rich limestone shelf underpinning the whole north of the state. Yes, the groundwater there is historically wonderful, and when settlers, European settlers, moved into Kentucky and began building farms, they built them on the sites of good water supplies, and these turned into distilleries that began as farms, and they became distilleries, and they started what we know now as Kentucky Bourbon. So yes, the old legend of the limestone water is true. But in fact, all the big distilleries today, they run on city water. Or sometimes they run on river water. Gotcha. And they make great bourbon. No one's saying they don't. But when you're in a city like Louisville, and you've got umpteen distilleries there, and you're all running on exactly the same water supply, to my whiskey mind, that is missing a possible point of differentiation. And it goes back to not only old Kentucky, where each water site was specific, but also to Scotland, where in a given city in Scotland, you might have one distillery on this side of the city that's getting their water supply from this burn, but over here they're getting it from a different water source. And the two whiskeys are totally different because they originated as totally different farms on totally different water sources. So that is the thing you begin with when you build a whiskey distillery. Where am I going to get my water, right? We want to make whiskey, we have to have a very plentiful source of water, and it needs to be cold. So where do you do that? And that was what we asked ourselves day 0 at New Riff, is where's the water going to come from? We were confident we could plug into the city water supply in northern Kentucky and make perfectly good bourbon. But before we do that, could we just look and learn and investigate the topology, investigate the geology, the hydrology that's going on in the groundwater where we are going to build this distillery right in front of the party source? And we found it right under our feet.
And so, like, you already owned the land. Like, you didn't know that it was already there.
Yes, Ken Lewis owned this land. We were going to build a distillery here.
No matter what.
Pardon the pun, hell or high water, right? We were going to build it here. It just so happened that right underneath us was this fantastic aquifer begging to be made. It got kind of spooky, like somebody wants this distillery to be made right here. And that was our water source. So it gives us 500 gallons a minute of this fantastically mineral-rich water. It's enough of a water supply to run a distillery the size of New Riff. It's not enough to run a huge bourbon factory. And that is the difference between our water supply and a really large distillery. New Riff makes up to 12,000 barrels a year. There are distilleries in Kentucky, I think, make 12,000 barrels in a week, probably, or close to it. What kind of water supply do they have? It ain't no 500 gallons a minute, right? So you can run a little distillery the size of New Riff on a water supply like this. And that's the myth that I would like to for today, anyway. To answer your question right now, I would maybe dispel the myth that limestone water is responsible. No, you just need good water to make whiskey. And tap water is okay. You can make good whiskey with tap water. And even river water is acceptable for making, I'm not going to name any names, but some of the greatest bourbons in my life were made off of a river feed. You know, it's okay. But we wanted to try and do something different. And casting back even to whiskey, to our drink number one, which was the gin, we feel like at New Riff we are capturing the flavor of this freaking spot on planet Earth, right here in this parking lot, is coming up into the barrel and the glass and making this whiskey. So running on a native, authentic groundwater was a turning point for New Riff. You know, to continue the musical analogy. And I'm thinking here of Hendrix's song, Bold as Love. Just ask the Axis. He knows everything. And the Axis, I think one of the things Jimmy had in mind writing that song was the turntable, right? Sure. You put the record down, you put it down on the spinning, and here is your turntable going. Just ask the Axis, and that is the axis, that is the turntable around which New Riff is spinning, right? And it's not only spinning for whiskey quality, it's spinning for quality to the world, because we get a geothermally cold water that comes out of the ground. It's 58 degrees every day of the year. That not only means New Riff can operate every day of the year, and we don't have a water supply that fluctuates in its temperature according to the summer. What happens to your tap water in the summer?
It's a little warm.
It's warm, right? Yeah. That screws up the production of many whiskey distilleries. That's why many of them shut down in the summer. So it not only means that New Riff can operate year-round, but more importantly, it is a geothermal advantage in our cooling processes. This water also provides the cooling water for the distillery. And the distillery needs many, many, many gallons of water to cool our process. We boil the mash, we cool it down. We vaporize the alcohol, we condense it back into liquid. All day long at the distillery, we are heating things and cooling them down. And to get our cooling water out of the ground, geothermally cold, means that we have a small fraction of chilling warm water. We don't have to run a huge electrically powered chiller in order to cool the warm city water or the warm river water.
Gotcha.
We have a geothermal advantage. And so it saves us untold thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, I don't know, but it saves a tremendous amount of fossil fuel that we don't have to burn to chill the water that we use. We have geothermally cold water. That also is a titanic game changer, not just for us, but for what we do in this work in making whiskey that impacts Mother Earth, impacts the environment. So we are doing a little part to save some fossil fuel usage by the fact that we run this well.
Awesome.
It's tremendous.
There we go. Fuck yeah.
So that's the thing I would change, is the limestone water that's so important for the horses. And do you really feed that horse tell us the truth. You run that horse on city water, right? You feed the horse
from the
tap water. Yes. It's good tap water in Kentucky, but it's not this limestone water source. And the part of the myth I want to go away is the imagery, the romance behind it. We use limestone water and it's so special. It's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, and there's moonbeams shining down on it. And every morning it's harvested by virgins with silver chalices, and this is what the imagery you get of the beautiful limestone water, and it's not the fact at all. All those great distilleries, they run on city water, and they make great bourbon. But we are very thrilled to have our own water supply.
Awesome.
The limestone water.
Well, there we go. The fucking Balboa is absolute fire, and that's question 3. So thank you.
Right on. Thank you.
Question 4, drink 4. What are we drinking?
We're departing Kentucky now.
Okay.
Departing New Riff. I wanted to include something else than just my own self-serving portfolio. You know,
well, we love New Riff. So
that seems to be the generous thing to do, and obviously we're not only formed and influenced by our own products that we want to sell and everybody to buy, et cetera, et cetera. So I certainly wanted to include something else, and I couldn't couldn't find any better answer than this bottle of Springbank whiskey. So going back to, I alluded to it earlier, I departed my freshman dorm room in college, sorry to say, with a small, I had about 6 or 7 or 8 bottles of single malt Scotch whiskey collection. And a pivotal event was when a friend of mine who worked in a bookstore sent me a copy, out of the blue, a copy of Michael Jackson's Guide to Single Malt Scotch. Maybe you've seen this book before. The late great Michael Jackson, the beer and whiskey writer. And this
Not
was,
the musician.
Not the musician, no. And this was the first that I ever knew of book that treated Scotch whiskey and every distillery and described the flavor. It wasn't just the history. I had read books about the history of it, and they were long on the history and light on the flavor. And this one was all about how do you taste this stuff. And it blew my whole head up. Like, wow, look at all these. And I categorically began working through all of these distilleries. And one of them that Michael Jackson wrote about so evocatively was, what did he call it? An elderly eccentric. Springbank Distillery, and even his writing about it stood out to me, and his summary of it, and the way he described the not just old-fashioned but the almost archaic way that they go about doing what they do, and also the fact that they were independent and didn't have to begin to bend the knee to a corporate master who said, you will make this much whiskey at this much price, and that's what you're going to do now because we just bought you. And all of those things lodged in my head, and they percolated. They fermented. they aged, and they matured all these years. And Springbank turned out to be, if I was one of several people who had a hand on the tiller of the good ship New Riff, and we're steering it, well, I steered it to my North Star, which was Springbank.
Okay.
This is, in my opinion, well, first of all, it's humble opinion, it's the greatest whiskey distillery on the face of the earth.
Okay.
Bar none. God love them. But it's also maybe the most influential whiskey distillery of our lifetime. So many trends that we see in whiskey around the world came out of Springbank, okay. And it's often not recognized as such. But the entire day zero quality precept at New Riff, which was no chill filtration, that comes from Springbank. So they became over the years my biggest influence. They influenced later distilleries, which were also important to me, like Bruichladdich. Bruichladdich came back to life. They were resuscitated in 2001, just when I was starting with the Party Source. I always felt like the modern Bruichladdich distillery and myself, we kind of grew up together.
Yeah.
They were coming along, and I was coming along, and I ordered them, and I bought all this Bruichladdich, and I sold it at the Party Source. We did a private barrel. I visited them multiple times. They were a big influence on me to make the gin that we made, because of the gin that they make there called Botanist. But it all stems back to Springbank. They were the most influential whiskey distillery, very quietly, very under the ground. They're like back to the musical analogy, the guitar genius that actually all these people were drawing from. And you thought Eddie Van Halen invented the tapping on the guitar, but no, it really was Harvey Mandel, and there are these subterranean influences sometimes, and that was the case of Springbank. To complete the story a little bit, cheers. Springbank, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Right? This is the stuff.
That is
such an evocative and distinctive whiskey. Of course, they have a nice water source. I could talk all day about Springbank, but I want to move on to what pleases me to say, our relationship with them today. So I visited Springbank in 2005 when I was with the Party Source, and that was walking into the gates of Valhalla, you know. We took their director of sales and marketing, David Allen, took us on a top to bottom tour of Springbank. It just crushed us. It was amazing. What a plant and what a facility and what an old whiskey making spot it is. There is some serious spiritual mojo going on at Springbank. It's a really special place. But coming out of that whole visit, one day they asked me from Springbank something to the effect of, and apologies to my Scottish friends for the brogue, but something to the effect of, do you have any barrels? They wanted to buy some used barrels.
Sure.
And so for an outfit like Springbank, we were able to peel off, a couple of containers full of barrels. So I'm happy to say that today there are a couple of times a year we send out
That's fucking awesome.
A trailer full of New Riff barrels to Springbank. And Tim, when you visit now the Springbank distillery and you go into the warehouse, and it's the old warehouse with the earthen floor, and it's an ancient spot, and right there in the middle of it all there's a barrel of New Riff sitting there on the floor of Springbank, where I started this journey years ago.
Fucking awesome.
Is a barrel with the New Riff logo right there. Oh, I can't believe it. It's
so fucking awesome.
It's so special that we have this relationship with one of our chief influences and so on. So here's to Springbank.
Springbank.
And to no chill filtration and everything that followed.
Yeah.
So that was a special distillery in my own journey along the way. That's my other choice for whiskey number 4.
All right. It's fucking awesome. All right. So question 4 then.
Question. Lay it on me.
So started 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Last year you just named Brian as master distiller.
Brian Sprance. That's right.
What's the future hold? Not looking for secrets, but just what does the future hold?
Secrets.
I mean,
what else are they working on?
Yeah.
So,
like what can we expect from New Riff in the future?
You can expect from the sort of 20,000 feet view, we are remaining an independent distillery. We have not only no plans to be or goal to be or trying to get bought up by some.
But being independent is like the ethos of New Riff.
That's
like,
critical. Yes, in fact, New Riff is really governed by a board of directors, not by. Ken Lewis is retired. He has a well-deserved sunsetting. In fact, this year he is serving as the chairman of the board at the Kentucky Distillers Association.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
11 years ago, he was running a store, and now he's the chairman of the board of Kentucky Distillers. So that's pretty cool. But we have a board of directors at New Riff, and the number one job of the writ that is given to that board is keep New Riff an independent company. So we think we are building here at New Riff a generational bourbon company. I mean, God willing, the tariffs and every other challenge that we all face in the course of history, but we hope that long after you and I and all of this is gone, maybe New Riff can still be standing there. And Springbank is an inspiration in that. This is founded, I believe, in 1828. In a few years, Springbank will celebrate under independent family ownership their 200th anniversary. Could New Riff aspire to something like that?
Let's hope.
We won't be here to see it.
Yeah, but that's
what we are trying to set up, and so that will continue. You can also count on us to, as it were, we're continuing to seek out and play upon the new riff on the old tradition. There are riffs coming that are, some of the riffs we make are very subtle and yet very deep, like bottled and bond without chill filtration. Most people don't notice that as some crazy thing we did, but it is actually a very deep and meaningful riff, but it's also a little quiet. But then we make things like winter whiskey, the chocolate oatmeal stout mash bill. And we make this whiskey we're about to talk about, our pour number 5. I'll save the thunder for the real thunder, but that is the riffs over the time, they get heavier and heavier and heavier. You know? And so we still are coming down. We've got some stuff in the warehouse that is like, what? Oh my goodness, they did what? Those things are coming. You know? So you can look forward to those as well.
Awesome. Well, there we go. That's question 4. Cheers.
Thanks, Tim.
Cheers. Question 5, drink 5. Last drink of the night. What are we drinking?
What indeed are we drinking? So following on from our visit to old Scotland, we have New Riff Single Malt. This is one of our new riffs, if you will, and a pretty powerful one, I dare say. At least we think so. We were interested in exploring malt whiskey. I had been kicking this around as far back as probably 2011, 2012. What would this look like, to do this in the Kentucky idiom, if you will. This is a pretty crazy, even maniacal project that we embarked on. So New Riff Single Malt, what in the hell is this? So it evolved and came out of the brains of a couple people, myself and our now master distiller Brian Springs, who we couldn't have done it without each other.
Right.
And we each brought important things to it that make up what it is today. For my part, I wanted to explore and be inspired by Scottish traditions, given my love and background in Scotch whiskey and everything like that. But I wanted to do it the Kentucky way, to interpret the Scottish tradition through the lens of the Kentucky tradition. And so I didn't just want to get some pot stills and try our best to make Scotch style whiskey. I wanted to be inspired by it, but do it through the format, through the idiom of Kentucky production. So this was an adventure in the multiple mash bills we made, 5 of them. An adventure in the casking and the cooperage that all of those things went into. And then a further adventure on the very back end of how the hell do we mix all this together to make a coherent product. And it's a one-of-a-kind thing. I dare say nobody in Kentucky is as crazy to do something like this, or as free, as independent to do something like this. This is a way more complicated project than normally gets bitten off in Kentucky and pursued. So on top of all that, this is of course bottled without chill filtration. It is cast strength, this year's edition, 114.5 proof. So what do we get from this New Riff Single Malt? I've just given you the fairly long version of the story.
Yeah, no, it's
amazing. And it's so complicated. But the short version is, finally, my friend, a single malt made in America, made in Kentucky, that drinks like a bourbon. It drinks like Kentucky whiskey. It's big, fat, heavy, full-bodied,
fucking good,
so huge, much bigger bodied and bigger in its mouthfeel than almost any Scotch. I don't mean better than Scotches, but the style of it is not what we know as Scotch. The style of it, when you take a sip, even when you mix with it. You ever had Rob Roy? Dude, this makes a motherfucker of a Rob Roy. It is so big and fat, just like we expect bourbon to be. It's a Kentucky-shaped but internationally flavored single malt whiskey. And it's absolutely one of a kind. It is, in a word, 4 words, sour mash single malt. And that's what we put on the label. This is not, of course you've heard of the emerging category, American single malt, thanks to our friends at the TGB who finally did legislate this into law.
Yep.
Single malt is now an American legislated whiskey style. This is tremendous. This doesn't happen very often. The last time, by my count, that America made a new whiskey style was 1972. So this doesn't happen very often that we have a new style of whiskey. And now we do, American single malt. This is not an American single malt, it's Kentucky single malt, damn it! Kentucky single malt! This is made in the Kentucky fashion, sour mash, column still and a doubler. It is not made in a pot still. It is made just like the bourbons, but all the ingredients, all the barrels, the casking, all of the back end blending is all completely different. And what it winds up being is I hope, a one-of-a-kind whiskey. This is maniacally complicated.
Yeah,
most companies are like, are you crazy?
Yeah,
you can't do that. Don't ever do this again.
Yeah.
And we embrace that, the possibility of the riff on the tradition. And here it is, like I was saying earlier, a riff on another tradition. It's as if we took the Kentucky tradition, and let's consider it as the column still, the tall, 60-foot tall column still. It's as if we took that thing like an interpretive lens, a telescope almost, and we trained it on Scotland, and we examined their tradition. But along the way, we also brought in, what about the traditions of just malted barley? What are these flavors you can do with malted barley that the hidebound traditions of the industry say you can't sell that, you can't do that. What if we could? And this is living into the spirit of New Riff in a powerful way, right?
We're on to question 5. All right, so our last question tonight comes down to the Flip of the Whiskey Wednesday coin.
Oh boy.
You can flip it, you can spin it, you can do whatever you want. The coin will give us the answer. You don't have to answer, but please feel inclined if you want to answer. But again, one side says fuck yeah, one side says fuck no.
And I hope I don't leave a divot in the table, because
it's
this is a substantial piece of metal.
It is, yeah.
This could hurt someone.
It is bulletproof, so I tell all of our guests that once they get the coin to keep it close to their heart, because again, you're in New York City, in case anybody tries to shoot you, it is bulletproof. And then also, if anybody fucks with you, you just throw it at them, because you'll brain them. So that'll be, but is there a point where the pursuit of innovation in whiskey risk losing what makes whiskey great in the first place?
Oh man, that's a heavier question than this coin, dude. You are nailing me with this question. All right, well, we'll do a little flip of it.
That says fuck no.
Fuck no.
Is that what you were looking for? I mean, your coin might be busted, so like.
The coin might be. How do you bust this thing? It's like spiritually. Busted. So we are saying fuck no. There is not a. That's the question. Yeah. Is there a point at which innovation leaves whiskey behind? I would. I have a foot in both camps. Yeah. Right. That endless new riffing, endless innovation is always to be respected and desired, and that's how we progress, right? In the whiskey industry, in whiskey making, but in human culture, Take rye whiskey, for example. We love us some rye in Riff. When I started at the Party Source, we had 4 rye whiskeys on the shelf, period. Those old-time brands. That was it. Go look at the shelf today. There's like 4 whole shelves of rye, right? So, if we can recover things like America's first whiskey, which is rye. It's the oldest whiskey we made in America. It predates bourbon. If we can recover something like that, shouldn't we always say, absolutely, the sky is always the limit, because you never know where someone's creative juices will take them, where someone's history and past and future intersect and leap into something new. But I do think there are avenues down which whiskey and other things are lost along the way. There are accelerated aging programs which they're onto something. Those things actually can make surprisingly good tasting whiskey after only the better part of 8 months or something in existence here on planet Earth. They're not hooey, but I just think that we have an age statement on everything we make. Are we really going to go to future generations with whatever letter follows after them? I'm Gen X, so are you. On. We got this shit on lockdown, But of all these generations in the future, are we really going to say to them, congratulations, you're the first generation that doesn't deserve properly aged whiskey. Yeah. Everybody else got bottled and bond. Everybody else got at least 4 years old and 8 years old and everything. But you, because we're here in a new paradigm, and we have microwaves and we have Star Trek going on, are we going to tell them, You don't need older whiskey. You just need this stuff we're going to push you that is 7 months old and run through a program or whatever they have. And again, there's something to those things. They are not, they're not just snake oil. But I'm going to come down on the side of do it right. Do it right. You know, there's a fun internal story to New Riff, Tim, that early we were launching New Riff. This is 2018. We had almost 4-year-old whiskey. We were about to launch and go out to the market. And we had a wonderful PR firm from New York, Hannah Lee. She's so great. Right here in New York. And the Hannah Lee folks, they're so good. So smart. And they came in and they were helping us birth it out to the world. You know, we don't really work with them now. They're not our PR people. But at the time, we wanted some really experienced folks. And they came in and they helped us coalesce the story, if you will. And they sat down with the principals at the distillery, all of us, and they asked us some questions. And one of the questions they asked was, what did you want New Riff to be, you know? And my answer to them was, I wanted someday that someone would look at this bottle and say, finally, someone did it right. Someone did it right. They didn't age it 1 year. It wasn't aged in 5-gallon barrels. They didn't take shortcuts. They did it right. The shit is bottled and bombed after everything else. To do it right. And that's what I want people to do for whiskey in the future. Keep doing it right. Don't shortcut this, don't shortcut that. Don't find a new technology that doesn't make what we are accustomed to as our birthright here in the United States of America is properly aged, rightly made whiskey. And that's the boil it all down, distill it, if you will, all down to a drop. That's New Riff's ethos. We want to do it right. We want to do it right for generations to come.
That's awesome.
But along the way, we will also give ourselves the freedom to do it differently, right? To play the riffs, to do it right. That's something I think at some point you can lose sight of that in the pursuit of doing it faster. And whiskey makers have always been trying to do it faster. And I understand that, but I think at some point you do lose the way of that. That's where I would come down on that question.
Okay.
Flip a coin. That's where we land.
Well, there we go.
That's where we land.
Well, that is 5 drinks down, 5 questions answered. Sir, thank you so much for joining me at this
Thank you, brother.
I really appreciate it, and I can't wait till we can drink together again. This has been absolutely amazing. Cheers to you, and till the next time. So, cheers.
Thanks, Tim.